On a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, it is NFL Week 15. It is Circa Millions, the show. It is December 18th, 2022. It is Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave or get out of the water. It is the Shark. It is the Gun. It is the Odds Fellow. Guns Picks. What's going on this morning, my brother?
Man, did we have a beautiful Saturday with college football bowls kicking off real well for us, getting profit once again. Hopefully you tailed us. And we also went monstrous in the NFL last week, so we are only heating up. It's only going to get better from here. So I'm ready for Week 15. Odds Fellow, what's going on, my friend?
Coming in hot off an unofficial, not officially official, unofficial, plus 2,000 Minnesota Vikings. Live bet. I had a narrative, thought down 27-0 at the end of the half, getting the ball in the second half was going to be interesting. When they went down 30 and then 30-33, I thought it was toast. But here we are, coming off that. $25 to win 500. Love it. Let's go. Let's keep rolling.
Yeah, when you're hitting the biggest comeback in NFL history as an implied odds in-game bet, the Odds Fellows on fire. We're ready to get hot. Sharky Waters Nation. 9 words of lifestyle. Rather than water. Buy hat engage. Guns picks. Let's talk some football. 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central. Soldier Field out there in the middle of the center of the country. Freezing cold, windy on Lake Michigan. Bird Gang coming in here on the road. Bird Gang unimpressive on the road outside of the division. And a look ahead spot. Guns picks. An official.
Yeah, this feels like a perfect flat spot situation for the Philadelphia Eagles here. Chicago's coming off a bye as well. You got to know that. So they're going to be rested. 6-game losing streak in that regard. But if you check the last 4 games, -8 point differential, -7 net yard average. So the net yard averages are pretty much staying identical. They just can't get the points on the board. A lot of this has to do with, Justin Fields coming in and out. As far as injuries are concerned, that's kind of been a problem for them. But for now, in this game, he's going to be playing and should be rocking there in Soldier Field. Now, Philly is running red hot here. We all know that. They're hitting a plus 15-point differential, plus 145 net yard average so far this season. But Chicago, if you look at them, they've been able to keep up with most of their teams that they're playing. They're playing really close in their losses with Justin Fields in the lineup. So I'm just only including the games that Justin Fields is starting and playing. They lost to Miami by 3. They lost to Detroit by 1. They lost to Atlanta by 3. Green Bay, who's always had their number, lost to them by 9. Chicago is just a better team at home as well. -1 point differential, plus 35 net yard average at Soldier Field. And we call this a divisional sandwich here, folks. Philly has coming off that win versus the New York Giants last week, absolutely crushed them. And guess who they got to play on the road next week? The Dallas Cowboys, folks, which is going to be a very huge game for the division. So looking at Chicago's situation, I just think the game is going to be a lot closer here. I can honestly see Philly just narrowly escaping this victory. I got him at +9. I think the line is dipping some if I check this morning. So I'm going to be riding with the Chicago Bears. Bear down for a 1-unit play, +9.
Yeah, completely aligned. I'm not wearing the hat as a prop. The buy hat is engaged. 1-unit +9 official. And jumping off what Gunn said, I mean, it doesn't really get any more sandwich than this in NFL football. First of all, 3 consecutive road games, which is very difficult travel, coming off of a divisional road game blowout, 48-22, which we did suggest would be the correct side last week. And as Guns mentioned, Saturday night, 4:25 p.m., Christmas Eve in Dallas, the biggest game of the entire season. This is inherently an awful, awful spot for the Birds. And you go to the other side of the game, as Guns mentioned, and I'd said in the open, but the Chicago Bears are actually 4-0 at home, ATS, outside of the division. Week 1 outright win in a monsoon against San Francisco. San Francisco obviously was not who they are now, but it stands for itself. Very impressive cover against Miami, a cover against Houston, and they have one non-cover outside the division. It was Washington on Thursday Night Football, which we did have correctly with Washington there. So the moral of the story here is, personally, and I think myself and Guns more specifically, have a good feel for the Bears. I had the Bears 2 weeks ago on Sunday, December 4th. Anybody who watched that game against Green Bay knows just how much of a melt that was. Green Bay outscored them 18-0 in the fourth quarter. They gave up. The Bears had 2 picks in the last 5 or 6 minutes of the game. Green Bay did what Green Bay has done so many times, cover the spread, and they did it in absolutely egregious backdoor fashion. Bears should stand up here today. And one final point. When you look at Philadelphia playing at Houston, Houston is the worst team in the sport, a non-cover 29-17, laying a big 14.5 figure. I think we're going to see it today. This is probably going to be tight, but I think the Birds probably win this game inside of 7 points. Odds fellow, first play of the afternoon. Huge game, and I don't think anybody saw this coming going back to the summer trying to prognosticate NFL football. Detroit Lions, 6-7, coming with significant momentum. New York Jets, over 500, 7-6, also with huge momentum in this season. Zach Wilson comes back today. There's been a lot of steam in this game. You're on it at -1. We're at -2, and a couple of 2.5s popping up right now. Talk to me on this one.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's literally in my notes. It's MetLife. It's December. It's Northeast December football. But who would have thought Jets-Lions, that's a meaningful matchup for both teams, not just even for one of them, for both teams here, staying in the playoff hunt, clinging to their playoff lives. Really 2 teams that are probably ahead of schedule than a lot of us thought. In terms of the number, we'll get into the stats. I don't mind it at 1.5 and 2. I obviously got the 1 early this morning. The line has been all over the place. If you can get sub 2, I think that's important just in today's NFL. 2.5 and 3 are a little bit different now. To me, almost sometimes 2 feels like the new 3, right? In terms of some of those pushes with going for it on 4th down, going for 2, extra points, things like that noise. But here what we got is classic offense versus defense matchup. And I think what's really key is this leads me to 2 plays. Larger 1 unit on the Jets at that 1, and then a half unit play on the under at 43.5. But what we've seen from these 2 teams is really different home versus away as well, especially with the Lions. Point differential, very close. Jets come in at 21. Detroit, off that Vikings win, has just flipped to 2. But let's start getting into the offense and the defense and the home versus away thing that I'm mentioning. So yards per play, the Jets defense tied second at 4.8 defensively compared to the Detroit offense at 7th at 5.9. So on paper, good offenses versus defensive matchup. But at that defensive number at home holds for the Jets, 4.8. They hold the average, the total number. Detroit drops from 6.2 home down to 5.3 away. Okay. Third down percentage defense, Jets 15th at 38.92 compared to the Detroit offense at 8th at 43.13. So they're converting at a solid clip. Again, at home, the Jets slightly increased. They kind of hold the number 39% up to 40.96. The Detroit offense offensively drops all the way from 48.48% down to 34.43%. This offense, which is high-powered and has gotten going, can't get going as well on the road, and they're playing a very good Jets defense here. A couple other stats I picked up from Warren Sharp and a couple of the other podcasts I try to digest during the week. Minnesota plays the second most zone. Detroit was able to exploit that. Now they come in and play a team against the Jets and Robert Saleh-led defense that plays a lot of man coverage, doesn't play into what Goff and the Lions want to do. Minnesota was the worst defense against play action coming into this week compared to the Jets, who are the best defense against play action. Detroit at home, first in points per drive, TD per drive, scores per drive, and the lowest punts per drive offensively. Flip the script away. They drop to the bottom 10 in all 4 categories, okay? So there's just too much noise here, offense versus defense here, home versus away splits. And I think the Jets defense, without even Mike White, steps up. I don't need Zach Wilson to come back and cover a huge number, so I think he gets it done, and that's why that game script to me stays low. They're going to try to run the ball. They're going to try to keep it out of Wilson's hand. So I feel like Drabaka's onto it. We feel like a Jets win. Let's go low and get that Jets dub.
Yeah. And I would talk about this off the record. We'll go into it briefly. I personally think this game is a bit of a toss. And I think, there's a lot of different moving parts. And I think, when you look at the Jets, it's hard to figure out how they're going to perform in this environment for 2 reasons. And it's because of the quarterbacks. If you go back out of the division for the Jets this year, they've played Joe Flacco, Mike White, and I believe Zach Wilson has not gotten a home start outside of the division. I'm looking at it now. He's only played in the division. He played against Miami in week 5, New England in week 8, and Buffalo in week 9. But The game against Chicago in Week 12, that was Mike White, a blowout 31-10, obviously against the NFC North traveling over there. And then early season, 2 games outside the division against Baltimore and Cincinnati, both Joe Flacco. So this game does take on a bit of an unknown with Zach Wilson's first start this year at home outside of the division. And of course, Zach Wilson does not appear to be enigmatic as a person. He's a very gentle, young-looking man, but it seems that he's become very polarizing in the locker room. And of course, getting benched after making some fairly tone-deaf remarks after a really poor effort going back against, I believe it was New England on the road, the game that New England walked off with a late punt return touchdown. And then obviously insert Mike White. But Mike White, rib injury. Here comes Zach Wilson again. You go to the other side of the game here. The Lions, for me, I think, are hard to look at from long-term data within this season because I think everything really changed for this team in Week 9. And at that point in the season, they were 1-6. And they had talked about this. Dan Campbell talked about it. I'm sure the coordinators talk about it because they got these great ex-players, Deuce Staley, Aaron Glenn, and a bunch of other guys over there. Randall L. is like the receiver coach. It's just basically like a fantasy team from the 90s, more or less. But they basically said, we didn't know how to close a football game. And it's very psychologically oriented. It's like when you're playing basketball and you're shooting poorly, and then all of a sudden you see the ball go in the hoop. You believe you can do it. And that's what happened with the Lions, pretty much. They were 1-6. They didn't know how to win a game. All of a sudden, they turned a corner in Week 9, and they've won 5 out of their last 6. And the only loss was a really tight loss to Buffalo at home, who's obviously, 1A and 1C in the AFC. So I think for me, my take only on this, I'm willing to throw out the corollary game, if you want to call it that, at New England, road outside against the AFC East, because that was, it seems like a decade ago for this team, basically. And you go back to a game that I think is a little disturbing for the Jets' take here, at New York, in the same stadium against the Giants in Week 11, a 31-18 win. So I don't entirely disagree. I think they are scorching hot. And I think the Jets, as you mentioned, play far better defense at home, and all the numbers are on it. I'm just worried that the Lions have some merit here. Guns, any comments on this one?
It's hard because these are 2 bye teams, in my opinion. And you said it perfectly. 1-6. They've been 5-1 since their 1-6 start. You actually look at, the Jets at the beginning of the season were a road team. They were the team that loved to, all business trip, go out there and win W's. But now you're looking at them back-to-back road losses. They're actually lost their last 3 road games. Now they're coming home playing a Detroit team. The problem with this is this would be a good spot to take the Jets. However, the Zach Wilson factor is the key point that makes me nervous. I don't know if the team is going to rally around him. They obviously, Saleh obviously doesn't want him to be the quarterback there. He's made some kind of offhanded comments in press conferences, leading it to believe that Wilson's obviously not the guy, but he has to use him in this spot. That's the key factor in this one. If he makes mistakes and Detroit with their offense can be opportunistic, they've already been in this MetLife Stadium and trounced a New York team already. So that kind of makes me nervous too. It's just too sharp for me. I like it when these teams are playing other teams, so you can actually take the Jets, take the Lions. The Lions are on a steamroll right now. I'm a little bit nervous if they come out here in MetLife and trounce the Jets. So complete pass for me, no leans either way. I can understand any side that you're on this one.
Yeah, we spent enough time on that game. Excuse me. Next game, we're going 1:00 yet again. Caesars Superdome, New Orleans, Louisiana. A divisional rivalry game here, going back to Week 1. A lot of moving parts yet again. No Marcus Mariota, certainly no Jameis Winston. Andy Dalton versus Cincinnati's finest, Desmond Ridder. I'm sure Guns knows more about this guy than I do, dating back to the last few seasons in college football. But nonetheless, an interesting spot here for both teams in a division that is comically wide open in terms of just the general mediocrity. Not one team over 500 at this point in time. Both these teams could still make the playoffs, crazily enough. New Orleans playing for pride. Some good quotes coming out of the locker room. But I do think this is a short line. We talked about this in the division line functionality. 5.5 road, come home shorter. That, of course, is adjusted for personnel differences. But when Vegas is averaging this new group shorter at home than they were on the road, this is looking towards the Falcons, and Guns picks has an official here.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Falcons here. These two teams match up. They're very patternistic as far as who wins these games, and it's usually the road team is the spot you want to take these teams. And I'll get to that in a second. But look at Atlanta right now, coming off back-to-back losses, losing to Washington 19-13 on the road. Goal line turnover. They had an opportunity to win the game, and they couldn't put the biscuit in the basket, as they say. And got the turnover. And then they go back and they lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers 19-16. So they're losing a lot of close games. They're starting to get frisky again. And they're coming off a bye week, so they should be well rested for this game. But also the Saints are coming off a bye week too. So I guess that kind of washes everything out. But New Orleans in a similar spot, losing back-to-back games, both on the road to San Francisco and Tampa. Monday Night Football, the Tampa game was a 2-minute classic Tom Brady drill that we hadn't seen all year, and we ended up getting to see it in that game. And then Atlanta does something different. So Mariota's not going to be starting today. They're going to be going with Desmond Ridder, the man that took the Cincinnati Bearcats to a college football playoff. He's got the mobility. He's got the arm. I think this is going to be – it's almost like you get a younger version of Marcus Mariota in this spot. So, the game film, nothing really on him. So there's a lot of coin tosses on how he's going to do in here. But I think he's going to be fine in his first start here. The team will rally around him and protect this young quarterback who's probably going to be the future for the Atlanta Falcons. This is a revenge game for Atlanta. So they lost in week 1 to New Orleans, 27-26, despite having a plus 31 net yard average for the game. So when these two teams met, I just mentioned it earlier, the away team is the best team to take. The home team in this spot, 1-7 against the spread in the last 8 matchups dating back to 2019. So with all that being said and everything, I think Desmond Ridder steps out here in a road spot on the carpet, a place that he's played before. So I'm going to be going with the Atlanta Falcons +4, and that's 1.5 unit play for me.
Anthony Latino alignment, I believe.
Oh, baby. Oh, yes. We'll keep it short. I mean, you mentioned Shark, which I love, the line scaling there a little bit, which I think does matter in a division game, in a revenge spot. That was an absolute melt in week 1. Atlanta surprised a lot of people, and, they started out very hot. I think two interesting things to point out. Like I said, I don't want to beat this up. We want to keep things moving. But the big part was really, all year I've kind of talked about Atlanta, ATS, and some regression here. They started out ridiculous 6-0 ATS. They lost 4 in a row. We cashed some tickets there, trying to fade some of those spots against some very good teams. They've been 1-2 in the last 3 weeks, including an L2, right? So 1 and then 2 non-covers. I think they come back here and they cover, even if they don't get the win. I like it at 4. There's some 4.5s out there. The big key for me is the rushing offense for Atlanta, which is what they want to do, especially with Desmond Ridder and a little bit of a spark to get going against the rushing defense for New Orleans. New Orleans has typically a pretty good defense. DVOA-wise, they're 15th overall, but 21st against the rush and 12th against the defense, which I think counters well to the Atlanta offense, again, especially with a rookie quarterback, 6th rushing, 12th overall, 16th passing. So if they can come in and move the ball like they did to that net yard average that Guns mentioned in week 1, they run the ball today, and I think they keep this one tight. Similar maybe to the Mike White Bears game, Bears-Jets that we mentioned. Obviously, that was not a division. It was a home road game, but just the spark overall of an Atlanta team that's floundered a little bit. I do think the change here to Desmond Ridder matters. So I like them to get it done at +4, +4.5.
Yeah, I would agree. Unofficial for me, but I do align with you guys. I think Atlanta is the side here, and I see a couple guys in the chat. Miggy, our guy, all respect to you, man. You're a sharp guy. We appreciate your interactions. I will say this, though. Just categorizing a rookie QB blanketly on the road, as I was mentioning before, Vegas odds makers integrate into the line the personnel moves. So when they shorten it up, they're actually telling you that Desmond Ridder versus Andy Dalton is actually a tighter expectancy on the road for Atlanta than Mariota versus Jameis Winston was, which is how the numbers tell you all the narratives personnel-wise. And that's why the numbers really do matter as an average and a tail as to forecast the game. But going forward, as we've spent enough time on this game, we're going down to what I like to call the pit. And what I mean by that is not so much Jacksonville, Florida being a pit, but it's a pit. It's a dead zone spot for teams traveling down there in oftentimes uninspiring matchups. Of course, the Jags, having gone to the AFC title game a few years ago with Leonard Fournette and Blake Bortles, and of course going far, far back into the 90s, Mark Brunell, I believe, also playing the Patriots deep in the playoffs. But outside of those two runs, really, really a lackluster franchise. However, I think turning a corner here, and we had talked about this between weeks 4 and 8, this team lost 5 straight games, and every single one of those losses was by one possession. And this team has been very above average at home. If we really go through this, they haven't played a ton of home games because they did have one of their home games in London. But go back to week 2, absolutely hammered Indianapolis 24-0. Giants opened up their out-of-division campaign at home. And if you guys remember that Giants game was right down to the wire. And that could have really gone either way. Really a tight line. That was their only out-of-division home non-cover of the year. They are 2-1 ATS. I think they're showing signs. And again, I think this is kind of the flow we were talking about with Detroit. So they didn't cover against the New York Giants. They came back 2 weeks later against Las Vegas, came out very flat in the first half off the London trip the previous week, but did find their wind and backdoor the game and went outright and cover the spread 27-20. And I think even more impressively, week 12 against Baltimore, another tight game. And I think this is going to be a tight game today, of course, but a 28-27 win as this team, similar to what I said about Detroit, is starting to believe they can win these tight games. And they find Dallas really, in my opinion, I think Dallas is scaling downward. I think they're teetering on a loss. And we talk about this in all sports, but it does apply to NFL football as well. And if you really start to go through this, the Dak Prescott Cowboys hammered the Giants on Thanksgiving Day in the division. Then they came back the following week, and it looks like they hammered Indianapolis because they did win the game 54-19, but they outscored Indianapolis 33-0 in the fourth quarter. And of course, you saw Indianapolis yesterday with the melt. Indianapolis with historic melts in the last 4 or 5 weeks. But nonetheless, 54-19, that was not a blowout from the get. It was a tight game. They got some turnovers in the fourth quarter, and it opened up. And then last week against Houston, another very lackluster performance. So they played poorly twice in a row at home outside of the division, outside of one quarter, the fourth quarter against Indianapolis. Now they go on the road, third consecutive game against the AFC South. Really a dead zone travel spot. And as we talked about when we capped the Chicago-Philadelphia game, they have probably their biggest game of the year on Saturday at 4:25 at home against Philadelphia. It's a dead zone spot. It's a look-ahead spot. It's a trap spot. It's a brutal travel. It's where Jacksonville performs very well. And again, I think Dallas is just kind of bottoming out here emotionally, and maybe there's some bodily fatigue as well. I'm on it officially. Jacksonville +4 1 unit. Guns picks alignment.
Say shout out to the Razor in the chat. What's going on, my man? I'm with you on this one, man. This is one of my top plays this week. I love Jacksonville. This is another one of those sandwich spots. Divisional game coming up. They're going to have to go play the Philadelphia Eagles next week. So Jacksonville is coming off a nice win themselves, winning 36-22 versus Tennessee, +64 net yards for the game, but a +4 turnover ratio that kind of decided the outcome in that one. Now you got Dallas. They're absolutely red hot. They're on a 4-game winning streak, but they've been at home the past 3 weeks. So back-to-back home games. Now they get to go travel on the road after a flat win over the Houston Texans 27-23, +77 net yards for that game. Dallas, like I said, first road game in a month. And also first time they're playing on grass, if that plays into any indication, since Green Bay in week 10. So the footing is going to be a little bit different. You're going to go play on the road. Not necessarily the nicest place to play on the planet. So especially with Jacksonville, because they're just a strong home team this year. +3-point differential at home, +60 net yard average. So this team is a strong home team. Not necessarily the greatest away team on the planet, but they'll step up in this one against a huge opponent. And Dallas, like I said, potential look-ahead spot for playing Philadelphia next week at home in a revenge spot where they lost to them in week 6, 26-17. So keep that in mind when we're capping Dallas versus Philly next week. I know I'll be looking at it. But on this spot, The line's short for a reason. I'm going to be taking Jacksonville Jaguars. I got them at +4. They're down to +3.5, +3. That's still fine. Just keep it above the 3. Give me Jacksonville 2-unit special.
The only lean I have here is just a slight lean to the over. I think it could be similar to the Cowboys Bears and Cowboys Texans even last week, where defense maybe gets a little lackadaisical. The offense should be able to move the ball in theory. So again, might be a look, but could be a live look too.
Yeah, no, it's a great look, and those are the top 2 officials for me at 1:00. Just quickly talking about one game where I don't think anybody has a great angle. Kansas City playing at Houston, laying another just professional championship line, as I like to call it, where they don't function very well. And you saw it last week. They got up against Denver, they gave it back, and it really is just Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes football. They have these huge lines. They know they're going to beat you. They don't really seem to care to obliterate you anymore. Obviously, coming off a Super Bowl run a couple years ago, conserving energy to a degree, and also just lacking inspiration. They don't care to blow you out. They just don't. And
they're 4-9 ATS.
Yeah.
They're not pounding it, right?
100%. And this really started last year, even the year before in the regular season, when they were laying these big numbers where they just don't cover. And so I think without going into immense detail here, I think try to avoid these type of games. They're just whatever, very backwood, if you will. But I think the lean would be to Houston. I think you get the same type of spot where Houston was getting a large number at home against Philadelphia, and they did cover. It was tight. You guys saw the last time Kansas City laid 15.5 at home to the Rams. When the Rams were playing, I believe, a third-string quarterback. They were very fortunate to get a late turnover and a field goal to cover by a hook. It's going to be tight, but I think, just if anybody wants to sprinkle even $20 on the game for fun, Houston's probably the lean. Any comments from either of you guys on this one? Or
just a slight lean to the under for me on this one. I try to do leans on all totals and come up with a number and a game script, and it's a slight lean under here for me, but nothing huge. Probably won't make that official either. Guns?
I lean to the over on this one. It's just Kansas City on the road. It's like they score 33 points per game on the road versus 25 at home. So they're just a different animal when they're on the road versus at home. They're coming off they scored 34 against Denver, a good defense. Maybe they just go out there and they just stomp the Texans. However, Texans will have to keep up some way, shape, or form. Kansas City's defense is not that good, so I think they'll score points as well. So if I had to lean on this one, probably be towards the over.
Yeah, final 1:00 game. Slightly more intrigue than I think that people would have expected going back a few weeks with Carolina, who at one point in the season was really trending towards just a historically awful season at 2-7, had moved quarterbacks in and out. Baker Mayfield, PJ Walker, of course, Sam Darnold, now the quarterback. But this team is 3-1 straight up in their last 4 ball games. They're 2-0, both ATS and straight up in their last 2 home games, coming off a really impressive win at Seattle last week, which I don't think a lot of people saw them going in there and winning outright. Of course, Guns had that officially. We talked about that last week. Very sharp take with Carolina. But now they come home and they get Pittsburgh. And I think Pittsburgh is in a tough position here for one particular reason. They have Mitchell Trubisky back in at quarterback. And the guy is just purely not a top-level professional quarterback. And you saw Kenny Pickett come in and get some win. He won 3 out of 4 ball games from week 10 through 13. But last week, he got hurt early. Trubisky was in there. We had Pittsburgh in that game, and they did not cover. But, again, you cannot put money on Mitchell Trubisky. I think the lean here is the home team. Guns picks, however, has an official.
Yeah, I'm on Carolina on this one. I got a -2.5. I think those lines are still out there if you're looking around. Carolina's heating up. They're actually playing really good football right now. They've won 3 out of their last 4 games, +4 point differential, +21 net yard average in that span. Now Pittsburgh, they're coming off a home divisional loss, 16-14 to Baltimore, +20 net yard average for the game. But they lost Kenny Pickett in the process. Got to put in Mitchell Trubisky. Not a guy I want to be trusting if I'm betting on them today. There's a reason why they're a dog on the road here. Look at Carolina at home this year. Actually pretty efficient. +2 point differential, -38 net yard average. So, take that with a grain of salt, but they're still going into home games and winning, especially on the back half of the season here. Look at Carolina right now in the last 7 games, 6-1 against the spread in their last 7 games. And this is the first time they are favored since October 2nd of 2022. I think that was week 5, 6 on that one. So this is the first time they've actually been favored since then. Always been a dog. Now Kenny Pickett is out, like we talked about before. Concussion. Got to put in Mitchell Trubisky. Not a guy I'm going to trust with my money. I'm going to be going with Carolina here. And it could be Sam Darnold as a quarterback. Could be PJ Walker as a quarterback. It could be me as a quarterback. I'm still going to be covering that damn spread for you boys. Give me Carolina -2.5, 1.5 unit special.
Yeah, and any comments on this one?
No, I mean, I've been high on this Pittsburgh team because I thought they got going a little bit after the bye and after turning the Pickett. I like the defense, especially with TJ Watt in. So tough to back them with Mitch. I mean, they should have got home last week. And Mitch threw, 3 picks? 1 or 2 of them were awful picks. And, they let that game slip out of their hands. So now momentum slipping away from them. Carolina coming up the other way. Tough to back them with Mitch at the helm, slightly into the under. It's a low number. Usually when I see those, I like Vegas to go low, and then I go lower.
Yeah, and I think Guns makes a great point. When you see this team favored for the first time in over a calendar year, it's telling you a numerical story. It's telling you the weighting of the game is leaning towards the home team. And final point here, as we were talking about with the Saints game against the Falcons, this division is wide open. This team is actually in control of their own destiny. If the Panthers win out, they win the division, and that's it. So, I mean, talk about motivation. And we talked about this, obviously, quarterbacks, different coaches, Matt Rule, obviously back to college, and we got our guy, I believe, Marks, Wilkes, something like that. No disrespect to my guy there, but I don't follow the coaching carousel as closely as I probably should. But nonetheless, I think Carolina is absolutely the sharp look on this game tonight. 4 o'clock games. We got 4 of them. Let's talk about it. 32 minutes in. Sharky Waters Nation, 9 words lifestyle. Ride the way out of the water. Circa Millions, the show. The Gun and the Odds fellow on a suddenly not so casual 7-point sharp Sunday, December the 18th, 2022, 4:05 p.m. Fox Sports. Really, really a game that I think people would have thought would have significant intrigue coming into the year. Cardinals at 4-9, Broncos at really an unbelievable 3-10. I mean, this is one of the biggest disappointments in recent history in the NFL. I think that Nathaniel Hackett will be shown the door after this year. I think Cliff Kingsbury is suddenly also on the hot seat after starting out last year 7-0 straight up, really showing no significance ever since. I believe Russell Wilson is questionable. I think he's in concussion protocols. That would potentially bring in Boise State's finest, Brett Rippon. And I think there's a lot of moving parts in this game. Colt McCoy on the road, 2 backups, short line, low scoring outcome predicted here at 36.5. If I had a lean, I would lay it with Denver. And I think, again, the fact that the number is so low is telling you this is going to be another one of those awful football games with no points. The Denver defense just basically handcuffs the other team. Free play, office pool, I would lean towards the home team here at -1.5, but nothing official. Any comments on this one?
No, probably another messy one where I will eventually take the under. I might see just where this thing is trending. Brett Ripien is in. Russell Wilson, after clearing the concussion protocol, has been ruled out. So maybe finally a team that's fed up with the worst trade and the worst fleecing since Jerry Jones, took over the Minnesota Vikings for that Herschel Walker deal way back when to set up the Cowboys dynasty. But that's where I lean. I think you're right on the number. Tough just to see motivation here between these two teams. Not to say these guys aren't. Obviously, they're playing for contracts and deals in the future and other reasons. But it's going to be a messy one. I'm sure one that not a lot of people will have circled on the television.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is, I think somebody just said in the chat, this game shouldn't even be televised, shaking my head. Mike, I agree with you. I mean, this is really some low-level football. And, as I mentioned, within this game, the only group within this game that is truly worthwhile is the Denver defense. So if you're looking at this game, center on the Denver defense, expect a very low-scoring game. And expect a tight line, but I think Denver money line is probably the best look in this game if I had to suggest anything here. Guns picks, next game. We're going the hat, the fandom, the entire environment, and also just an incredible matchup finding Josh McDaniels against his old team in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, Nevada. Las Vegas getting steamed up here a little bit, opened up a little shorter, now at -2. It appears 2.5 in a couple spots. Right around there at all points. And New England on the road, back-to-back road games on the West Coast. They did stay out there all week. I think that sometimes plays well for teams. They get their camaraderie. They're with the group. It's kind of like a mini 1-week training camp, if you will, just to get the group going in a better direction. Of course, New England off an impressive win last week at Arizona. Las Vegas at home has been far above average versus their road environments, and Las Vegas does need the win, and they are obviously motivated in this spot. But I don't really have a look on this game. I'll throw it to the gun for some comments, and then we can jump off for a second here.
Yeah, I mean, you got the Raiders losing the way they did last week. Last second touchdown from Baker Mayfield, 17-16. They did win the net yards in that one, and also you got the New England Patriots coming off a nice road win versus Arizona, 27-13. This is one of those spots. It's Bill Belichick. It's versus Josh McDaniels. It's dad's coming home for Christmas type of situation to go play you. So there's motivation on both sides of the ball here. I lean probably the under on this one. I just think both these guys understand how each other plays. Josh McDaniels understands the intricacies of the Patriots offense, and then you got the Patriots just having a really good, solid defense this year that's been carrying them all through the season. So if I had to lean on this one, it'd be the under, but I'm staying away from this one. It's a toss up for me as far as the spread goes.
Yeah, you wanted to make a comment about the other football game potentially.
Yeah, I mean, maybe Guns can share it. I guess there was another goal. I've lost TV privileges down here to keep the little ones quiet, which they never are. But still, I know it was 1-0. I think Messi had scored early. It might be 2-0 early Argentina. Wow.
Yeah, and
wow.
Yeah, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. Of course, I know people are probably glued to that as well. So we appreciate you watching our show and interacting with us. And we see a couple guys in the chat. My guy 49er says, sending positive vibes to you guys, especially Shark. Fuck the haters, less cash. And, haters will hate. We know they're just people in their house not feeling great vibes. We're sending great vibes to everybody. People in this world all have good intention, generally speaking. They just have a hard time figuring it out. So we're sending everybody great vibes. And let's continue talking about this game for a brief second. As I mentioned, I'm looking at it in a little more detail now. I had mentioned when I opened this, far better at home Las Vegas Raiders. And I think this is fairly noteworthy. If you go through their last 4 home ball games, a significant win early season against Denver, 32-23. Another blowout win. It did come late, but it did come nonetheless, 38-20 against Houston. They laid an egg against Indianapolis in Jeff Saturday's first game. Definitely a bit of a Indianapolis buy spot there. And then they did cover in an official play we had 2 weeks ago against the Chargers, 27-20. So, I mean, just going through that, they've played a lot of road games. They've only played 4 home games since week 4. They are 3-1 ATS and 3-1 straight up. If you're going to buy the Raiders, you want to buy them at home. And as Guns mentioned, that melt going back about a week and a half ago on Thursday Night Football at the Rams, I mean, that is inexcusable stuff. That should not happen. That is just purely a lack of focus and a lack of discipline. And, of course, slightly aided, unfortunately, by the refs on the final drive. A couple, not necessarily wrong calls, but when they're tacking on 15 yards in small windows, 98 yards, Baker Mayfield, the whole thing. I mean, that's got to sting if you're the Raiders. They were right there at 5-7. That would have gotten them to 6-7, right in the playoff race, right to where they were last year, as we mentioned, going to the playoffs last year, I believe at 10-7. So trending up to that average from last year. I would lean Vegas here, but I'm definitely not betting on this game. I really do not like betting against Bill Belichick, regardless of the situation. So I got nothing, but I think, again, the standout point, Vegas at home, definitely a buy environment more than anything else. Any comments on this one?
No, I'll keep it short and brief. I mean, Belichick against a former assistant, always an interesting, fun matchup. I think the narrative, people get lazy and say, oh, he owns them. I don't think that's actually been the case of late. Some of that's probably Vrabel doing a little bit better and some of these guys being a little bit more successful. Motivation, interesting here, just with the Raiders blowing that lead in that game last week. I didn't understand the line movement. I think somebody in the chat said the line movement probably tells you a lot. It is steam. It is big. This thing was at a pick'em for a long time. So concerning. I probably lean Pats, but again, just one I'm going to watch and enjoy and maybe look for live value.
Yeah. Next game, we're going back to the odds fellow. Chargers at home, catching the Titans. We've detailed this all year. The Titans now are 7-6 straight up. And you guys remember this, only going back a few weeks, Thursday Night Football at Green Bay, they got to 7-3, and we're really moving up in the AFC playoff race. Quickly coming down after covering, I believe, 8 straight games, and it might have been 9. I don't have it directly in front of me here, but key point here, when this team plays playoff teams, they don't perform particularly well. The odds fellow, an official play.
Rick, we are pretty cool. Cool dudes. You guys are cool.
Goddamn right we are.
But
Goddamn right.
Both teams are 8-5 against the spread. So I think some of that regression we have seen. I think what's really interesting to me and just what I'm kind of playing off here, I am going to drop this to a half unit at least to start. Then may look for some live value to get over that 1 unit mark, maybe 1.5. I like overall what I think the Chargers are going to be able to do offensively against a Titans team that has struggled offensively. The Titans here, from a motivational standpoint, they almost all but have this division locked up. The only reason it's still, not a sure done deal is because they got blown out against the Jags last week, which sets up pretty much a division game for all the marbles in Week 18. The Titans could lose out every other game, every out of division matchup until then, as long as they beat the Jags in Week 18, and that assumes those teams keep pace with each other, right? Because Tennessee still holds the lead, but. Just looking into here, you mentioned the playoff things. I mean, blowouts against Buffalo and Philly, some tight losses against the Giants, the Chiefs, and the Cincinnati Bengals, all good teams. And then close wins against Vegas, Washington, Denver, and Green Bay. On paper, Vegas, Washington, Denver, and Green Bay, those wins probably look a little bit different than they played out during the season. We all know what those teams actually are. So I would put the Chargers in a little bit more of a category of the Giants and the Bengals there. Obviously not in the upper echelon like the Bills and the Eagles, but that for me at home I think is enough. And when you look at some of the home road stuff again, the Chargers are 9th overall offensively in terms of third down conversion rate at 42.71, but that number gets much better at home, 45.83. And what really stood out, again, just thinking of that third down thing and where Chargers might be able to have success in some longer drives here. Tennessee's first overall in third down conversion percentage defense in the league at 27.85 at home. First overall with that number, but that thing jumps all the way up to 34.74 on the road. So they aren't converting as much, and that includes a 46.15% bomb that they laid, allowing the Jags to run all over them on third down last week. So a couple things there to key in on. The Tennessee Titans passing defense, 28th overall per DVOA. Their rushing defense, very good at number 1. But again, that's the game script, not what the Chargers want to do. The Chargers want to pass the ball. They want to use Eckler out of the backfield. They want to get Justin Herbert going. They've gotten more of those weapons back. This is a game Tampa needs. At 3, I would love a 2, 2.5, or 1.5. It's not there. At 3, favored to like a plus 100, minus 105 that I saw. I still think it's worth it. Again, that's a half unit play for me just because the counter, there's always a counter, is probably Vrabel against this dumb Chargers coaching staff that can't seem to get out of their own way. But I think, Rick just mentioned again, Titans can afford to lose. I think the Chargers passing attack gets it done. So -3, half unit.
I agree with you. And I think, again, if you really start to go through the Titans schedule here, you have to look at their road games, and you have to look at just the gigantic discrepancy between non-playoff teams and playoff teams. And this team really started to cluster wins against bad teams. Week 4 at Indianapolis, 24-17. Week 5 at Washington, back when Carson Wentz was still the quarterback, throwing very timely interceptions for the opponents. And they did win that game on a tight goal line stand. And then in Week 8 at Houston, as we mentioned before, Houston, the worst record in the entire sport. And then at Green Bay, 27-17. Green Bay is sitting at 5-8 in this campaign. So as much as people might want to say that's an impressive win, when a team is 5-8, what was it? Bill Parcells said, you are what your record is. It doesn't matter what the media says. If you're a Hall of Fame quarterback, if you won a Super Bowl in 2010 or whatever it was, you are what your record is. And the Green Bay Packers are 5-8. So that does not, for me, stand up as an impressive win. It's a non-playoff win. And you really center on 2 out of the 3 games against playoff caliber opponents. Week 2 at Buffalo, demolished 41-7. Week 13 at Philadelphia, demolished 35-10. And a tight loss to Kansas City. Malik Willis was the quarterback. Kansas City, as we were talking about just a few minutes ago, did what they do. They don't really try to blow you out, and they did cover that one and lose outright. So I think all angles are pointing to the Chargers. Chargers are definitely an upward movement team. They had some issues at home early season when Justin Herbert was injured, particularly outside of the division against Jacksonville and slightly later on against Seattle. But I think everything is pointing to the Chargers here, and I think fading the Titans is really just a sharp, sustained angle right now. Guns Picks, any comments on this one, or do you want to keep it moving?
Yeah, this one I don't have any look on this one, but I think it's interesting that you have a rushing team going against a bad rushing defense in the Chargers, and then on the other side you have a bad passing defense in the Titans going against a high volatile passing offense in the Chargers. So if I had to lean on this one, I'd probably say it may sound public, it may sound square, but I think this is an overtake on this one. I think there could be a lot of points on this one, but I don't hate the Chargers take on that one either. But yeah, it's just nothing I'm going to be touching officially on this one.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of totals, last game at 4:00, 4:25 p.m. Tampa, Florida, Raymond James Stadium. Bucks come home here off a bye, off a blowout loss at San Francisco 2 weeks ago, 35-7, catching the Bengals. The Bucks are hard to figure out. Guns Picks is looking at a total and under at 45.
Yeah, on this one, I'm going to be looking at the under on this one. But when you look at these two teams, you would think, okay, you got Joe Burrow going against Tom Brady. You're like, oh, yeah, there's going to be a lot of passing. There's going to be a lot of points. I don't think that's going to be the case on this one. I'm actually thinking when you actually look at these two teams and break them down, it doesn't make sense that you would have ever taken over with these two teams. So, Cincinnati, high-scoring team at home, but when they're on the road, numbers drop drastically. So their totals for on the road, 45 points per game. So it's kind of right on the number there. But look at the Tampa side of the ball. When they play at home, their totals average 40 points per game on average and 39 points per game in their last 4 games. So a little bit lower there with these two teams. Also, Cincinnati is 8-4-1 to the under this season, where Tampa is 10-3 to the under this season. And if you even take it a couple steps further, you look at Cincinnati on the road in the last 36 road games. You want to go real deep into the stats. 24-9-3 to the under on the road, and Tampa is on a four. They've hit the under 4 out of the last 5 in their last 5 home games as well. So with all that being said, also look at the defensive side. I went into the DVOA. Shout out to the odds fellow for studying the DVOA. So I've been doing that a little bit more lately. Cincinnati is ranked 10th on the defensive side in DVOA, where Tampa is ranked 11th. So I think these two teams are going to go back and forth. And with I know Cincinnati can score. Tampa definitely can't score. So I think you're going to have a slow, methodical game. Going to be hopefully really, really boring. And Cincinnati's just kind of running red hot, and I think there's going to be a little bit drop off going on the road. So I'm going to go with the under on this one, 1.5 unit special under.
And because I do lean there with you too. Usually I like to look at the splits too, a first half, second half, over unders, because sometimes I think you can find some good angles on totals there more so than ATS. Going into last week, Tampa Bay couldn't get out of their own way. Scoring the ball in the first half. I took Niners, Bucks under first half. It went over because they couldn't stop the Niners. So first half under here, I think could be a good look. I mean, like I said, going into that, they were averaging like 8.1 points per game in the first half. The other counter for the full game is look at Cincinnati over the last 2 seasons, especially the run they got on last year. Again, I don't know all the stats in front of me. This is a narrative I've heard, but it's definitely true. That Bengals defense and the adjustments they make in the second half are huge. There was a ton of games where they gave up like 0 points and 3 points in the second half. So it's going to be interesting here. I think it goes low as well. Fishy line to me at the 3.5. I do kind of lean Tampa, and I'll kick it over to Shark just to see if he's got any lean on the game.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, when you look at what's been going on with Cincinnati, and we know some guys are just starting to watch the show. I mean, we appreciate you guys immensely. We have been saying this all year with Cincinnati. This is just what I call the procrastinators. And I'll say it every week. Certain people in life, well, they don't have to do it early season. They hang out. They're like, we're good. And then when it matters, they have just an incredibly higher level they can go to. And Cincinnati is doing exactly what they did last year. Last year, they were 4-4 through 8 games, and then they turned it up. And we sat on this show in week 8, and we said, they're probably going to turn it up and do exactly what they did last year. And look what they've done. They've won 5 straight games, including some very impressive performances. At Pittsburgh, a cover in week 11, back-to-back road games off a divisional cover, which is theoretically very tough travel. Another cover at Tennessee, came home off seemingly a high yet again and beat Kansas City. And then off the Kansas City high of all highs, beat Cleveland and covered last week, 23-10. So this team is showcasing that sustainability which did take them to the Super Bowl last year. But the key point is go back to their last few games outside of the division on the road. Very, very tight on the number. At Tennessee, they were laying, I believe, 1.5 points, and they won the game 20-16, right around it. Go back to week 6 at New Orleans. They were laying 3.5 in that game, I believe, and they won the game 30-26. So I think when you're looking at 3.5 here, you're looking at a very, very sharp number. I think sharp action will be on Tampa Bay, as sharp market people like to buy underdogs, buy lows, fade winning streaks, etc. I see the sharp side on Tampa, but as you guys detailed, Tampa right now, for whatever reason, just can't get in the end zone. It's not a lack of yardage. It's not an inefficiency with Tom Brady, really. I was reading he leads the league in completions, and he's top 4 in passing yards. It's just red zone. I think to a certain degree, it's lacking tight end presence. Obviously, for years with the Patriots, throw it up to Gronk. Gronk will come down with it. They lack that. They lack an inside rush out of nowhere. And obviously, moving on, Leonard Fournette and Rachaad White, both. But something has to flip here. I just don't entirely understand it. But until they do, this is going to be tough stuff to buy. I think the line is 100% short. Theoretically, it should be Tampa. But again, I do worry that not being able to get into the end zone could bite them when it comes down to it. So nothing official from me here, but obviously a great conversational point. Final game on the slate. We're going to NFC East football, 8:20 p.m. Landover, Maryland, FedEx Field. Giants come on the road here, having tied the Commanders going back a couple weeks. A lot going on in this game. Both teams with the same record and basically the same exact environment, home and away. Giants are 3-2 on the road. Commanders are 3-3 at home. This game is almost a direct mirror of itself on both sides of the game. But I do think there's a sharp angle here. I think Guns has an official, and then we'll jump off with some conversation.
Yeah, I do have an official on this one. I like Washington in this one -4. I actually you see the stats for the game that tied. A lot of things had to happen for Washington to not get the cover in that game. So that kind of is stuck in my mind, probably stuck in the mind of a lot of the Commanders there. You got Washington coming off a bye after that loss, but after that tie, by the way. Following a 3-game win streak, they've won 6 out of their last 8 games. So they're 6-1-1 in the last 8 games. The Giants haven't won a game in a month. They're off a 48-22 beating from the Philadelphia Eagles, just absolutely getting dominated in the net yards too, -133 net yards in that game. This is probably going to be decided, and I think this is strength versus weakness, is the New York Giants offensive line versus the Washington defensive line. Washington's offensive line is ranked 31st against in pass protection this season. They give up 11.3 sack rate to their opponents. If you look at Washington's defensive line, they are ranked 9th in pass rush, 8.4 sack rate this season, and they accomplish this all without their top pass rusher in Chase Young. Chase Young, I'm hearing he's going to be back for this game. I think this is going to be his inaugural game this season coming into this spot. So there's also an added strength measure there for the Commanders. Also, looking the other side of the spectrum for the Giants defensive line, they're ranked 32nd in pass rush with a 2.8% sack rate. So big variance there. As far as getting to the quarterback, making him make mistakes, make bad throws, sacks, what have you. Washington definitely has the edge there. Also, Washington right now, 6-1-1 against the spread in their last 8 games. This is just not a train you want to get in front of right now. They're playing better football. Putting Heineke into the offense has just been the perfect spot. I don't know why he wasn't the starter from week 1. I don't know what they saw in Carson Wentz to begin with. They apparently didn't have a TV for the past 2 to 3 years to watch him play. So that blame the front office of Washington. I like this Washington team. I think they're just playing better football right now. They're ranked higher in DVOA. The Giants are just a falling franchise right now, and I'm not going to actually put my hard-earned dollars on this Giants team. So give me Washington -4. That's a 2-unit play for me.
Yeah, I think you're making valid points. I think, when you look at these two teams, both teams are doing pretty much the polar opposite in this season. And you look at Washington, they started off 1-4, and now they're 6-1-1 last 8. Giants are pretty much the exact opposite. Giants started 6-1, and now they're 1-3 or 1-4-1 in their last 6. So really, it's the polar opposite schedule and seasonal flow for these teams. But I do think to a certain degree, when you look at the Giants here, we had said this in week 8 when the Giants went to Seattle. We said Seattle was the sharp take in that game, and it was because the Giants had been traveling all over the place for a period of weeks. They were in London, then they were at home, then they were in Florida, in Jacksonville, and then they went directly to Seattle. So that was really a bottom-out point. So it makes sense as to why they lost to Seattle. They came home off a bye in week 10 and beat Houston and did cover, I believe, 24-16. And then this is where it gets a little murky in terms of, are they really that bad? Or did they just kind of cap out against better opponents? In week 11, they lost to Detroit. We talked about this before. Detroit has won, I believe, 6 out of 7 or something, 5 out of 6. Detroit is not some sort of dud team. So that makes some sense. Detroit just came in there and balled out against them. Then they got hammered at Dallas, which is fine. Dallas is a better team. Tied Washington and got hammered by Philadelphia, which is also fine because Philadelphia is the best team in the sport right now. So if you really start to go through these, Detroit, Dallas, and Philly, I'm not saying that I don't think the Giants did anything wrong in those games. I just don't think they can play up to that quality. So then you go back 2 weeks ago, they played to a tie. And I think Washington and the Giants are incredibly evenly matched. And that's what I said when I introed the game. Same record and basically the same exact home and away record. I think this game's just going to play tight again. I really do. And I think this is what we talked about with the Atlanta game against New Orleans, the divisional line. When Washington lays 2.5 points on the road and they come home at 4.5, this should be 5.5, 6, almost 7 if we're looking at strength. And again, I think the Giants take on some sort of bye environment. And as you mentioned, Taylor Heineke coming in here, I would say to a certain degree on a bit of a heater. Obviously covering at home against the Falcons. Sharps were on the Falcons. There was a lot of moving parts there. Heineke only threw for 138 in that game, and they did cover it by 1.5 points, somewhere around there. I think this game's going to be tight. I think Washington could win. But I'm looking at the Giants at plus 4.5 with significance here. And I might be going official with this later in the day. Odds fellow, some comments?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you. We actually did put this one in as one of the contest plays, I think at 4 or 4.5. And I lean there at the points. I'm going to let the day play out a little bit, but probably we'll add this one later. We'll see if the line goes in my favor again and keeps moving that way. I just think it's hard after that last game 2 weeks ago, knowing the motivational spots for both teams, that we don't get a similar matchup here, right? So to get the 4.5 in a division game in one that we saw 2 weeks ago is really interesting to me in a game that I think is honestly a field goal game or less. Will it go to OT? Will it be as messy? Who knows? But that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I said it on the show last week, that Eagles game, even if they were going to get blown out from them no matter what, the Eagles are really good. So all credits to the Philadelphia Eagles and how they've looked all season long, including Jalen Hurts, probably your MVP this season. That game meant nothing to the Giants, right? And then you have the Commanders here who played the Giants and then had a bye to come back and play the Giants again. It's a really weird schedule spot. These two teams' playoff lives matter probably in this matchup. It's almost a loser leaves town in that regard of, whoever walks away from this is probably that 7th wild card spot as long as a couple other things play out. So, interesting there. One quick thing on the total. I lean under because it stayed right around that same number. That was filthy, though. I got super lucky. You talk about bad beats. The pendulum does swing. I had under 40.5 points going into overtime at a 2020 game, and the tie cashed that ticket. So keep that one in mind. The pendulum does swing both ways. But for me, slight lean under, and probably will add the Giants later on.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's, as a final point in this game, that is a super interesting point. It's very rare in this sport that you see a team play a team, have a bye, and then play the same team again. I mean, that is historically very rare. And it's hard to figure out the motivation of the game, particularly coming off a tie. Who's really more angry than the other off a tie? It's kind of like a counter narrative to any sort of revenge. It's like this weird neutrality almost. But I don't know. We'll see. But I'm probably leaning towards the Giants. And as I mentioned, I might make that official later on in the day. And speaking of this beautiful Sunday.
One more key point on that game. I did mention that Chase Young may play in this game. It looks like I just looked it up on my phone. It's confirmed. Right? He announced that he's out. He's probably not going to play until the last 3 weeks of the season. Doesn't matter. The stats still apply because he hasn't played all season anyway.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think you were right.
I just want to make that clear to everybody. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna get off here. 1 hour in the books. Week 15, Circa Millions, the show, December 18th, 2022. The Shark, the Gun, and the Odds Fellow. Guns picks. 5 official plays. Chicago Bears +9, Jacksonville +4, Atlanta +4, Carolina -2.5, under 45, Cincinnati, Tampa Bay. 2 top plays for me. 9 words of lifestyle. Ride the wave, go to the water. Bear the fuck down, Chicago. Let's stand up. Philadelphia Eagles, look ahead spot, sandwich spot, division road, out of division, and then at Dallas next week. 0-4 ATS on the road outside of the division. Take the points with Chicago. Expect a tighter game than people might think. And Jacksonville catching the Cowboys, who I think are teetering towards a loss. And I think this is just a look-ahead spot. Philly's the game of the year next week. 3 straight games against the AFC South. First time all year they're playing outdoors at the AFC. First game against the AFC on the road all year. A lot going on there, and probably looking at the Giants late night. I do agree, and I align with the Atlanta and Carolina takes as well. Odds fellow New York Jets -1, -2, 2.5 now. Detroit Jets under 43.5. Atlanta +4, alignment with the gun. And Chargers -3, continuing the fade of the Titans, who have made a living on the road this year against non-playoff teams, not playoff caliber teams. Great show. Love working with you guys. A pleasure. We appreciate you guys in the chat. Drop likes and retweets as we grow this channel up. Bring the abundance and the respect and the love to everybody through this channel and the beautiful world we live in. Guns picks. Close them out with some words, and let's dominate this Sunday.
Rick said it best in the chat. Be cool, guys. Be cool. And hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and hit the little bell so you know every time that we're going to be live on here. I mean, we still got like 2 sessions of bowl games. We absolutely cooked it yesterday. Me and the Sharks, leans, the plays, they all fired. Last week, if you saw us on the NFL show, we absolutely dominated that as well. Sharks swept. I went 4-1, and I think Oddsfell had himself a damn day as well. But for everybody in week 15, let's cash some tickets. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you next week, every Sunday, 10 a.m. For more plays. And also check out the part 2 of the bowl season as well. We'll figure out what day and time we're going to do that. We'll let you know on Twitter. So till then, let's cash some tickets. Let's win some money. And as always, let's keep dancing.